Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're going to take a look at the RedPawz R011 FPV kit. Now this is a complete and total FPV kit for $65. $65 gets you a vehicle you can FPV, goggles you can FPV with, and a remote. It's all fully serviceable. If anybody wants to get started, $65. I just don't know if you could do any better than that. I'm going to do this a bit different than I do my normal reviews. These goggles we've seen before. I actually have another set of them. Just a quick peek. It probably shouldn't appear in this video. Yeah. These goggles have been around. They're 35 or 36 bucks. All they did in this particular case is they just blocked out one of the receiver ports. I think if you tried real hard, you could get another SMA connector in there and you could put another receiver. No, these box goggles did not come with this receiver. This is my choice. This is an Amway antenna. It's a circular polarized. It's right-hand polarized, and this tends to work better when you're flying in and around objects. The circularization will help you get a good signal from your FPV. They're completely serviceable goggles, but I cannot use them. I have to have other people use them and then report to me how they look because I wear glasses and they don't fit inside. I can tell you from aesthetics, they're very small goggles. I started out with box goggles and these are so much smaller, but they still, when I'm in them, I did put them on. It's just blurry for me. It's still very immersive. You feel like you're in the cockpit, that you still get that FPV feel using box goggles. Now in the video, you're going to see footage from the camera. You cannot record with these. It does not feature a DVR. It has a host of other features. It's got a built-in battery. You charge it right here. It's got the typical functions that you'll find over here for controlling the screen, contrast, brightness, saturation, stuff like this. This is the power button. You press and hold, and then it'll scan for the channel that you're on, so it finds the channel that you're on. Makes it nice and easy for this. It's got a nice head strap. It's kind of interesting that they even went so far as to redesign it and label it. The foam piece is nice and comfortable. The nose here, there is a little bit of light gap down here, but for $35, I don't think we can complain. And right in here in the baggie is a foam piece you could stick right there to block that. We also have, as you see here in the bag, some cleaning wipes. We have an additional cable to run an external receiver. We have the USB charging cable, and we also have a whipper dipole antenna. You can use this, especially with this unit, because those antennas will match. What you might find is if you go around or behind objects that you start to lose signal, and that's where a circular polarized antenna has a benefit. Also, what comes with the kit, we have a USB cable to charge, and we've got an extra set of props, and we got a little screwdriver in here, and the battery, which is, where did I do with the battery? Here's the battery. See if I can get this to focus. Hopefully you can see that there. That is a 35C 200 milliamp battery. It comes with the MCPX or PH2 connector. They're sometimes called either one. This is a very popular style of connector now. We used to run a smaller one on vehicles like this, and we just found that that was a bottleneck as far as being able to fly these or get the power to these vehicles very well and be able to be very aggressive. So these sort of batteries, you may have a bunch laying around. If not, I would grab a handful. I think they're dirt cheap. I would get 5 or so. Also in the box comes some kind of snazzy stickers, really. And you can put them right here on the front of your goggles if you wanted to. The remote is a little bit difficult for me to handle. I'm used to flying hobby grade radios, and when we get this small, this is a little bit tough for me. But I think for many of you, if you're starting out, this is going to be perfectly acceptable, and it's actually very serviceable. And the flight footage that you're going to see, I would say that if you're just starting out, you're probably going to be able to do better than I am after a few runs. And that's because I'm used to flying without any self-stabilization. I'm used to flying with a big old receiver like this, and I'm a pincher, so I tend to fly like this, and I can't really do that with this one. It looks like I can hold it. I tried several times, but I just didn't feel like I could do this, and that made it a bit more difficult for me. But that's a transitional thing, so if you're starting out, this is going to be perfectly acceptable for you. Another thing in the flight footage you should note is that the vehicle may look choppy. It may look like it's snapping every once in a while, and that's because it's got self-stabilization. So this thing is always working back to center. So if you're flying along and you give the stick some some right roll, and you roll a little bit, and when you let off, it wants to come back right away. And I'm used to that not happening. When you're flying without that self-stabilization, when you give it some less stick and you let off, it stays at that angle until you give it the opposite. So I spent many hours flying without self-stabilization, and it makes it quite a challenge to go back to it. But I did my best, and I'm certain that with some practice that you will all be better than I am at it. The Canopy, it gives it a little bit of style, but one thing I noticed is when I crashed and when I got underneath a door or a cabinet or a countertop, that these little ridges actually kept me from getting out of there. And also, if you compare this frame to other frames we've seen on the market that look just like it, this one feels a bit different. It feels a bit lighter, but I didn't have any problems with crashes or anything breaking. As you see it here, I've flown it many times already. So I was a little bit concerned about the material change and that resulting in possibly extra crashes. You can also see I modified this to get the range a little bit more. All I did was just make a small hole and pull the antenna in both the machine and in the remote out a little bit, and that did help. In the flight footage, you'll notice that I'm sitting at the kitchen table by the big window, and once I get around to the far side where the stairs are all in between me and the vehicle, that's where I would get kind of a control lockout or fail-safe to where the vehicle wouldn't necessarily respond, and after I pulled out these antennas, that went away. So that's something that if you experience to where you lose control of the vehicle, it will just come down to the ground that you might want to do this. And it was very simple. I did it by hand with a really small drill bit and just kind of made a hole. It's especially simple here. I need to skip back to the Canopy a little bit. They did a nice job designing it. This button right here changed your band and your channel. I would say if you have the auto scan, unless you find that the auto scan doesn't lock onto the channel that it comes with by default, or you experience problems in the environment that you're flying, then you might want to try a different channel and then establishing that channel change with your goggles to see if it makes an improvement. And with FPV, sometimes you do have to change the channel depending upon your environment. They have very expensive devices called RF Explorers, which you can kind of tell at 2.4 gigahertz and 5.8 gigahertz, you know, where you need to be, where the gaps are. But in our case, this is a basic kit, so you're just going to have to try a few things. Now, one thing I need to mention right away is the weight of this. Whenever we're looking at these, what we oftentimes call tiny whoops or whoops, we have to look at the weight. Got our scale zeroed out. So we've got 19.7, and that's pretty much what we want. We want right around 20 grams. The further away from 20 grams we get, if it's high, then it becomes a short flight time. If it's low, it ends up with longer flight time and more thrust, so more fun. I'm sure there's a good bit of curiosity because the vehicle features more than just regular flight. So this is your rates. It'll beep. There are 3 different rates. It'll beep once for low, twice for medium, 3 times for high. This is to do your flips and rolls. You give it a button, then you give it direction, and it does a flip or a roll in that direction. So if I were flying along, I'd center the stick, hit this button, flip it up real quick, and it would do a front flip. And the same thing for a right or left flip or a back flip. Also, we have our trim buttons. These are all the trim buttons over here. So we have different fine tunings, right and left trims. This is left, this is right, this is down, this is up, and then up here is headless mode. I typically don't use headless mode, and what that means is that the vehicle, when you are in headless mode, when you activate headless mode, this is always away from you, and this is always left, always right, and always back. It doesn't matter which, if you turn the vehicle around and you press the stick forward, it's still going to go this way. That's headless mode. It doesn't really teach you to fly, but it can be a nice little gimmick to show friends because you can just do crazy yaw spins and still just fly it around in circles and people won't have any idea what you're doing. This button below the top button is the 1-key return. I would think you wouldn't need that because it's an inside vehicle, so hopefully you shouldn't get it so far out of control that you need it to come back to you. And it doesn't work like GPS. So if you've flown around the corner like maybe in my house and you hit the 1-key return, it's going to come directionally back at you, but not necessarily even at you, depending upon the attitude of the machine. So it can be helpful in very specific situations, but it doesn't return to home quite like you think with much larger, more expensive products. And then these last 2 buttons are our yaw. This is yaw. If you find the vehicle's continually turning one way, you want to you trim the yaw out the other way so that it holds steady when you're not giving it input. The sticks themselves, that you have a little bit of play with these. So you see they just slide on here, and you could extend them up high here. You probably have to put some hot glue or something in there to make it really firm, but you could extend those. And the reason why you might do that is if you're like me with your hands, you may find that a longer stick gives you more precise control, because on these gimbals, which are these stick areas here, when they get close to center, they do kind of snap back, and that makes, especially in the flight footage, it'll make it kind of snap and jerk, and that can be not pleasing to the eye if you're trying to make video to share with others. One last thing to share, this is a charger, and if you were going to get a bunch of batteries to fly with, I would highly suggest you get a charger like this, because you can charge 4 batteries at a time, and there's nothing like having 4 batteries all ready to go, and then maybe you have 4 more, you can set 4 more to charge while you have fun flying the 4 you've got charged up already. I'll see if I can't find a link to this. This product all came from Geek Buying, and the links will be back to Geek Buying. This was sent as a review sample. I had contacted them a week ago, and they were more than eager to try to send something, and I'm glad they sent a fairly decent product. It's a great starter kit. I think if you're looking for something to get you started and you don't want to spend a lot of money, and I was the same way, I went as low or budget as I could, because you don't know if this hobby's for you or not. People have issues with maybe inner ear issues where you get dizzy. If you get car sick, this can be a difficult hobby to get into, because that car sickness feel comes into being in the goggles, and maybe just flying isn't as much fun as you thought it would be. So this is a good way to experiment for only $65, and you get to decide whether this hobby is for you, and you get a completely serviceable vehicle, and you can progress from there. And if you decide to move on to something else, you have a pair of goggles that can work with anything that does 5.8 gigahertz, which is standard for FPV. That's a pretty good bargain in my opinion. If you're interested, I'll put a link down in the description down below. I'm going to say goodbye now. I'm going to leave you with the flight footage. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please leave those in the section down below. I'll have a link to this product from Geek Buying down in the description. If you're interested, I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching. Okay, a couple last things, little line of sight view of what we've got going on here. Excuse the echo, our basement still isn't fully furnished yet. But let's do a little punch. So 1, 2, 3. Not the absolute best for this size, but you know, we're talking about $65 for an entire kit. Let's also, I'm in the lowest rate, let's look at the pitch and roll. Uh-oh, get it too close to Rango there. That's our yaw. Now let's do a flip or a roll. So you can see it does require you to give it some input after it's recovered or it's attempting to recover. It'll be flatter if you just give it a little bit of throttle as it's recovering. But let's jump into the next rate, which will be our medium rates. Okay, so I heard the 2 beeps on the controller. And lastly, our yaw rate. Our yaw rate does pick up. And let's go into high rates, 3 beeps from the controller. Whoop, ran into Rango. And that's the beauty of these prop guards. Normally, if you bump into something and you don't have prop guards, it falls down and you got to go pick it up. So in high rates, that's pretty aggressive. It does look like the yaw rate increases. You can see we've got LVC, that blue light in the back there. Let me bring it over here a little bit. You can see that blue light flashing there. That will keep us from being able to do flips or rolls, but we can still fly, and we've actually still got good thrust and authority. So, in my opinion, one drawback to this kit is they have the LVC set a little too low, because if I try to do a flip or a roll right now, it just won't do it. But we can fly for a good long while. But that gives us an idea of the different rates and how they respond. Also gives you a little bit of a line of sight view of the thrust. Of course, you can get more thrust by upgrading these batteries. It's a pretty simple process. Just buy some more 6mm motors from your favorite vendor. I tend to use the ready-made RC strict motors. They're economical and perform pretty well. But I think for starting out, this will be just fine. And I can't think of a cheaper way to get started. You've got glasses, you've got a machine that flies, and you've got a remote control that's pretty reasonable. It is a toy remote control, but you know, it costs more than $65 just to get a very basic bottom line hobby grade remote. So overall, I think the kit's a good value, and it's very, very serviceable with the simplest of kitchen or DIY mods with the antennas. You've got something that you can fly most likely around your house. It could vary if you have lath and plaster and you try to go between walls, you may have some troubles. If you have aluminum studs in your walls, that may also give you troubles in getting the FPV or control link. But that's the end of our battery there, so you get a little bit of line of sight flight footage time. So that is the RedPawz R011. I think if you want something like this, if you're looking to get started in an FPV, or you got a young person in your life, or even a teenager or a young adult, or just somebody who enjoys hobbies like this, this is a good kit. The holidays aren't that far away. You might want to pick one up as well. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.